Hello and welcome to Insights. I am Elizabeth Omori. My co-presenter, Namdi Odipo, is on vacation. And this episode, two critical issues will be dissected. First is livestock development, which involves domesticated animals raised in an agricultural setting in order to provide labor and produce diversified products for consumption, like meat, eggs, milk, fur, leather, and wool. Livestock farming practices have largely shifted to intensive animal farming in Nigeria. Now, the National Livestock Transformation is a framework to transform the livestock sector and eradicate conflict by strengthening intensive livestock production systems, with the aim of making the sector more productive and sustainable. With the emergence of a ministry to take charge, how do we fully harness the potential of the sector to ensure food security and other benefits? This issue will top our discussion today. Another issue of concern is cultural beliefs. They are learned and shared across a group of people. For example, the Usu caste system. It dates back to the era when Igbo city-states were governed by Ordinani, a system of earth-based laws. Offenders found guilty of grave abominations were exiled to prevent the wrath of the deity and the spread of abomination among citizens. These outcasts are called Usu. Another perspective on the history of the Usu caste system centers on ostracism. It has faced criticism from those who view it as contrary to human rights, principles, and freedom from discrimination. We will deal with this in another segment, and if time permits, we will look at grassroots sports. So, welcome to Insights.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of aggrievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
Livestock are domesticated animals raised in an agricultural setting in order to provide labor and produce diversified products for consumption. In 2024, the Ministry of Livestock Development was established with the mandate to formulate, implement and monitor livestock development and animal health policies. It is also saddled with the responsibility to develop grazing reserves, ranches, pastoral welfare initiatives and conflict mitigation strategies. All these concerned stakeholders in the sector insist can be achieved through public-private investments. How do we make this sector a competitive one to achieve set objectives? My guest, the Minister of Livestock Development, Idi Mukhtar Meha, who joins us via Zoom, will speak to us. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on Inside this week.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, let's hear from you. What exactly is the blueprint like for this very important sector?
Thank you, Insights. As you have already said, the livestock industry has been neglected for a very, very long time. And for the first time in the history of this country, and since independence 64 years ago, Mr. President, Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GTFR, had that strategic vision and thinking to create that ministry to address that neglect that has happened over the years. And when you look at the livestock sector today in the country, it is a huge sector that employs millions of people. It is a repository of our animal source protein in terms of meat, eggs, and milk, as well as hide and skin, and a number of other derivatives that come from livestock once processed. That sector today, by our own estimation, is about 33 trillion naira. And therefore, what is demanded of the ministry? That ministry is to preside over the transformation of the sector from a traditional to a modern one, sustainable, vibrant, also to be able to be competitive at the global stage. How do we do that? We do that, number one, by genetic improvement of our livestock sector across the border will involve all the species, by managing animal health and diseases, by also moving, for instance, pastoralists who are today moving from point A to point B is a survival mechanism to be able to gradually resettle them in the grazing reserves so that all these other items I'm mentioning can be done properly, as well as optimizing the products from those animals. And therefore, this is what the ministry is all about. We are also going to work in concert with the private sector so that we create the enabling environment for both private and foreign investors to invest in this sector. That is to say that the livestock sector has been unlocked for all the value chains that have been dormant in that sector, to be triggered for people to come and invest and realize the full value for the country in terms of economic growth, job creation, food and nutrition security, as well as tackling poverty. Thank you.
All right. Lately, some memoranda were signed to aid the development of this sector. Could you explain to us what these agreements entail?
I do assume you are referring to the trip we had during the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Yes.
There, while the summit was going on, myself and my other colleagues, we had the opportunity to cover a lot of farms in Brazil, Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, etc., etc. We saw a number of farms, principally meat processors. In particular here, we were attracted to do that for having in mind three basic things. One, we wanted to identify global players in terms of the red meat industry. We also wanted to see their scale of operations as well, their financial capability, and then one model were they running to source those feedstuff to process the meat they were processing and exporting all over the world. Now, we were satisfied that we discovered JBS Group. Now, JBS, by any standard today, is the biggest global player, if not number one, number two in many of the indices today in the red meat industry. We have been able to hold discussions with them, and at the end of the day, right in front of Mr. President and the president of JBS, we committed and signed a commitment to work together. Already, the first team came in January to do a reconnaissance, looking at our own local domestic livestock markets. They were satisfied with what they saw. Of course, there's a huge room for improvement. The second delegation is coming this February, and we do hope to meet them and probably concretize also that commitment physically on the ground. Now, the investment we envisage to receive from that commitment is about 2.5 billion, crystallizing into two beef plants, processing of beef, 2 plants for dairy, and then 2 plants for pork. And these are all aimed at both domestic and international consumption. So therefore, that was a huge success, and that is to say that there's a growing confidence with the singular action of Mr. President creating that ministry. A lot of interest, commitment, appetite is being whetted both locally and internationally.
Well, it's good to know that so much impressive steps have been taken. Now, I would at this point like to bring up the issue of Ruga settlement introduced by former President Muhammadu Buhari. Would you say the vision of this new ministry will help address herder-farmer conflicts?
Yeah, thank you very much. What we are looking at today is that we do know that from time immemorial, we've always had herders roaming the countryside. However, today, it has gotten to a point where the competition for scarce resources is acute. And therefore, we need to put on our thinking caps and say what is the best way to organize our livestock sector. Let us remove the emotions. Let us remove the profiling. Let us remove the stigmatization. Livestock is a business. is beyond anyone else's cultural considerations. It is a repository of wealth. It is a repository of national protein. And therefore, how do you look at it? Let us agree on two irreducible minimums. Number one, if you look at livestock, it's a business. And that goes without saying that every business requires premises to operate. Whether you are doing airports, you are doing schools, you are doing clinics, you are doing railways, you are doing media communication, every business requires premises. And therefore, that means that whether you are doing piggery, you are doing poultry, you are doing rabbitry, you are doing apiculture, you require business premises to operate. And therefore, it goes without saying that those involved in livestock as well also require business. Number one. Number two, as long as you are involved in legitimate business, then you also have the constitutional guarantee that you can do your business in any part of this country. These are the two irreducible minimums. And therefore, looking at livestock business, if they require premises, then they should be legally allocated premises to do their business. But of course, roaming about from point A to point B means that you are not settled in anyone known premises, because to graze, you need certain infrastructural development. You need that those lands are not encumbered by estate developers or by farmers. They are meant for grazing. And that is what has been gazetted. And therefore, they need to receive those infrastructure development in terms of grass, in terms of earth dams, in terms of other human infrastructure to receive both animals and the herders' families themselves. What are we saying? What we are saying here is that those grazing reserves today should receive some form of pasture development, some form of earth dams, so that we can do dry season irrigation. They also need potable drinking water for both animal watering and the families of the herders. They also need to receive, and therefore, our own intention today, we are going to work with the state governments and other development partners to ensure that the infrastructure we have mentioned above have been provided on those grazing reserves, so that the herders and anybody else who want to do livestock business can have access to those lands unencumbered and ready to receive their businesses. This is what the ministry is thinking, and we have already started talking to the sub-national government to work together and make sure that those grazing reserves are used for the purpose for which they were legally intended, and they are in the position to receive those infrastructure to ensure that they attract and incentivize the herders to remain there in one area. Once that happens, we should be able to do a number of things.
Now, some states are beginning to come up with their animal management health services, which is actually a good step in the right direction. But how do we sustain growth of this critical sector?
We already started engagements with the state governors and then also with the respective livestock farmers. We have started engagement. We will sit down and agree on a model deployed jointly so that they are involved from day one. It's not top-down, but it's bottom-up. What do they require? What do they need to remain in one area? Of course, we do know that just like human, we are dealing with life.
Yes.
We are dealing with life. This is livestock. Once they have grass, we know what they want, what kind of grass will do in those areas. They also require water. These are the two minimum ingredients that are required. But of course, also they need security, confidence that where they are there, they will not be subject to any form of attack or cattle rustling. So we are also talking with the security agents to ensure that once we earmark an area for resettlement and infrastructural development, the security providers will also be there to ensure that those are not easy targets. And therefore, these are the minimum requirements that we want to bring. And we do believe that once this is done, they will take ownership in terms of managing the dams, in terms of growing their own grass, because we are going to do a lot of capacity building for the herders themselves. We are also going to encourage commercial pasture producers to get into those reserves and also grow the pasture for them to access and afford also for the feeding of their own animals. Because each of those grazing reserves will now turn into communal ranches. They will also be able to attract processors in terms of dairy, milk processors, as well as abattoir operators, so that each of those grazing reserves, at the end of the day, will become an economic hub for everybody to benefit.
For everybody to benefit. All right, sometimes last year, the president, during a meeting with some key actors in animal husbandry, said that the traditional method of livestock farming will need to be reviewed and repositioned with support of stakeholders. With steps taken, where will this lead us in terms of investment? Let's be clear on that.
Number one, we need to fund the traditional method of animal husbandry.
Okay.
And the first port of call is to improve the genetic content of our animals. Because today, the average Nigerian animal roaming the countryside can hardly give you more than 2 liters of milk. Therefore, if you are looking for 100 liters of milk, probably you have to have 100 cows, Nigerian cows. If you are looking for 600 kg of carcass weight, of carcass of meat, red meat, probably not one animal can give you, looking at the Nigerian indigenous breed, probably you have to slaughter about 5. If you look at our goats, if you look at our sheep, if you look at our hens, our poultry, both layers and both layers and broilers, the meat outlay is limited when compared to other animals. If you look at our pigs, for instance, they can hardly weigh more than 60, 70 kg, while their counterparts are doing more than 200 kg at the same age. So what we are talking about here is the genetic potentials of our own livestock. This we have to work on. We have to inject new genetics, number one. Number two, we also have to change the feeding pattern. Because when animals roam the countryside and can only access farm residue that are nutritionally very, very low in terms of nutritional value, that raises a lot of question. Number two, we are looking at the rate of growth. The rate of growth is important because elsewhere, a bull at 30 months is weighing 600 kg. While ours here, before they cannot even, never will even hit 600 kg, even if you live there for 15 years. So the issue here is the genetic content. So what we are saying here is that it is our intention to work with the pastoralists, to work with all those who are active participants in the livestock value chain to make sure that these are easily available, they are propagated, they are grown. Depending on where you are, we know which kind of grasses can do in what ecozone. So this is what we are talking about. The third aspect of what we are looking at is management of animal health and diseases. It's very, very important. We are today saddled with a lot of endemic diseases. We are thinking of foot and mouth, we are thinking of black water, anthrax, tuberculosis, EPR, Gomboru, Newcastle. All these are endemic diseases. We should be in the position today to provide all the vaccines and the trade and the manpower to be able to manage those. Without tackling these 3 basic issues, we cannot talk of modernizing the animal husbandry system in the country today. And we have to do this so that we ourselves in this country are eating hygienic meat, marbled meat, and getting the sufficient eggs, as well as also getting abattoirs, meat processing under internationally acceptable hygienic conditions. So this is what we're talking about, modern animal husbandry management. We have to do all those that I have mentioned. In the next 10 years, our own projection is that we are going to triple the national herd. What do I mean by that? At the moment, we have close to 20-something million heads of cattle. We have 80 million goats. We have 60 million sheep. We have 9.3 million pigs. We have about 2 million camels. We have 500 million poultry. Please triple those numbers, quadruple those numbers. That is where we want to be. We also want to see that ranches, so far we have gotten a lot of appetite from both local and foreign investors to go into establishment of ranches all over the country. Today, we are talking of creating disease-free zones and disease-free compartments where abattoirs will be established, and these products of these abattoirs will be airlifted to the Middle East. We are talking with a lot of governments from the Gulf states, and then their counterparts in Nigeria have also shown very serious appetite to go into red meat processing. We also want to see where today cold chain transportation of meat products is happening all over the country rather than transportation of live animals. So this is where we want to see the industry to be. We also want to see a situation where all the endemic diseases I have mentioned have been tamed and eliminated. Already we have a program very active today under the AU, that's African Union, by 2030 to eliminate DPR. We also want to see a situation where the National Veterinary Research Institute of this country, located in Jos, is in the position to produce 1,200,000,000 doses of vaccines across the board.
Minister of Livestock Development, Edie Mukhtar Meha. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on Inside This Week.
Thank you for having me.
Culture and belief are a shared set of customs, values and convictions held by a group of people, essentially defining their way of life, where beliefs are the core ideas and convictions that individuals within that culture hold to be true, shaping their behaviors and perspectives. Beliefs are often deeply intertwined with the practices and traditions of the culture they belong to. A typical example is the Osu caste system, a traditional practice in Igbo land, characterized by social segregation and restrictions on interaction and marriage with a group of individuals known as Osu. Historically, they were treated as inferior, confined to living in shrines or marketplaces, and faced objections when seeking relationships outside their caste. Well, efforts to eradicate this system have been underway. In 1956, Igbo legislators in the Eastern House of Assembly abolished the practice of referring to people as Osu, imposing fines for public use of the term. In 2018, the practice was officially abolished through a ceremony and another ceremony in 2021 to eradicate the system. Today, we will analyze cultural practices, beliefs and norms. And Joseph Okechukwu, an activist and an author, as well as an actor, will be speaking to us. Mr. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Well, like you rightly said, this was abolished by the then Eastern Assembly in 1956. And the next prominent abolition exercise that took place since then had been the one that I carried out in 2018. I always tell people that the whole of my 2018 was dedicated to this exercise from January to December. And all of my activities to abolish this culminated in a massive abolition exercise that took place at Agukunri in Anambra State, a place we believe as Igbos that we came from, all right? So it was a very strategic location. We went there, we did it. It was like a spiritual abolition and all kinds of, a lot of symbolism that were involved in it. And right after that abolition exercise, to the glory of God, I would say, a lot of communities in Igbo land, I am talking close to 70 communities in Igbo land that never wanted to hear anything about abolishing Otsuka system, suddenly embraced the idea and began to carry out abolition exercises in pockets in different locations, from Imo to Anambra to Abia to Enugu to Ebonyi. We started hearing stories of abolition exercises happening in places no one ever thought they would ever happen. And I believe that it was due to the exercise that we carried out. I believe that the prayers we prayed on that ground that day has also begun to bear fruit. Okay, so on the question as of whether I believe it can truly be fully abolished, yes is the answer to that. I think it can be fully abolished, okay? It might not be, let me not say 110%, okay? But when we say fully here means a greater percentage of the practice can easily be eradicated if we do not just the physical abolition that everybody sees, that we need to also do sensitization. We need to carry out some type of positive propaganda against the practice, okay? Because it's a psychological thing. If you do not psychologically reorient the people, the physical exercises alone can only do so much. So that's why I went further. After that exercise, I went further to do a movie that basically origins of Osu practice, because 99.9% of the people who practice Osu in Igbo land today do not know exactly where it came from. They just know that they were told. It's like a weird, warped history that was handed to us, and we just practice it. And we are practicing this thing without a full knowledge of where it came from and all of that. So the movie that I have done is a product of 10 years of research. We just squeezed it to a movie. And the first thing that happens to you when you watch this movie is that you get an idea of, oh my goodness, this is where it came from. And if this is where it came from, why on earth are we then practicing it? So for me, things like this movie and so many other media content that are going to follow it afterwards are things we're going to use to carry out that psychological reorientation that will basically lay this thing finally to rest. Because the moment the minds are educated on what is happening, the practice itself begins to falter. And that's what I believe about this.
I need you to dwell more on the psychological aspect of this, because you said this is like handing over to generations a particular belief. Why is this so? How was it like? Did you experience it? Do you have a friend that experienced it? How come?
So I love the last line of your question. Did you experience this? Do you have anybody who has experienced this? The answer is yes. Okay, so before I jumped into this, something happened. I was telling that story a few days ago during an interview. I met a young man. You know, I grew up knowing about Osu. You know, when we were growing up, they used to tell us, those people, they call them NTA, those people. And I was wondering, who are those people? Are they not our brothers and sisters we grew up with? They keep telling us, no, you can't do that with them. No, you can't go here, you can't go there. You know, so we grew up with that level of confusion. And then when you tell the elders to explain to you further, they usually don't want to, they are always very economical with the truth about the whole thing, because maybe they didn't know. But there's something that spurred me into action, that got me to move into this activism. It was a young man, I think his name is Obinna. This guy had dated his girl for God knows how long, many years. And they finally got to the point where they decided they were going to get married. And you know how Igbos can be very extravagant in terms of the way we do our marriage, always very elaborate. So you have to do introduction, you have to do traditional marriage, and you have to do white wedding, and you know, and all kinds of stuff, you know, all of that together. So this guy had gone to do his introduction. Introduction is supposed to be a very low-key stuff where you just do just a few people invited, and then the parents of both families and all of that. But this guy made his introduction look like it was a traditional marriage. It was so massive because he was so happy to get married to the love of his life. And then after that introduction, guess what happened? The father of the bride-to-be suddenly came to the realization that they had not made any inquiries about the young man. See, all the while they were dating, nothing happened. He engaged the girl, nothing happened. They forgot. And then introduction happened. It was so elaborate and beautiful. And now they say, we haven't asked questions about this guy. Let's go and investigate. And then they went to investigate, called their people. They lived in Abuja. So they called the people back home, his umunas, his kinsmen. Say, please go and do investigation for me about this guy. And they went to do the investigation. And they traced his bloodline to the bloodline of the so-called Osu, which they also call outcasts. Okay? Now, when that result came, the man called his daughter and said, let me tell you now, that relationship is null and void. Both of them thought it was a joke, but guess what? It was for real. It got to a point where the man even picked a gun and wanted to kill his daughter for trying to mention that guy in his house. And at the end of the day, why did I get involved? I heard the story of how this young man, when the reality dawned on him, he went into his room and locked himself up and went on a hunger strike. That hunger strike lasted for 2 weeks, no food, no water. They had to break the door to his home to be able to save the guy. He was looking like a bone. This was what got me infuriated. When I heard the story, I said, I want to see him. They got the guy. I finally met with the guy. The guy was a shadow of himself. The guy he couldn't even pay. This was a guy who was doing so well in his business. He just couldn't bear the loss of the love of life because of a tradition, a culture that we have even no full understanding of. So I said to myself, okay, so if this is what is going on, why are we all acting like this thing doesn't happen? Because when you talk to my people, Igbo people, they're always like, oh, that was back then. It doesn't happen anymore. I can tell you that is taking place today that does not involve investigation. The moment you say you want to marry an Igbo man or an Igbo woman, whether it is inter-tribal marriage or the same Igbo people marrying themselves, there must be an investigation. And this is the reason why they do investigation. And I have seen people commit suicide. I have heard of suicide cases. In fact, there was one that almost happened the day we did the abolition exercise at Abuja in 2018. I had to beg the girl on the phone. I said, please come and meet me. I flew her into the east and I sat her down and spoke to her. If you look at, there's a blogger on Instagram recently that posted another one again of a girl who was crying and rolling herself on the floor, almost like she wants to kill herself. Why? Because the family of her so-called fiancé had just found out that she came from the bloodline of the Usu people. And the marriage was terminated. She was supposed to get married in January of this year. We are now in February. That girl was crying. If you see the pain, the guy called Tunde Edna, if you see the pain, if in the tone of this girl when she was crying, you would know that this person, if care is not taken, could actually commit suicide.
If we are to relate to Chinwe Achebe's work, which is no longer at ease, that book dealt with this particular issue. Now, as a concerned artist, let's go back to your work, which you were talking about earlier. How have you been able to tell the story beyond love, conscience, and purpose?
Okay, so I have been able to tell the story by pointing my people to the realities on ground. All right? I have an impressive, fairly impressive following on social media. And I always tell people that I strongly believe that the reason why a lot of people follow me on social media is just because of the fact that I always tell you something and show you the proof of it. I don't like sentimentalism. I don't like being unnecessarily emotional about stuff. I like to be forthright and be straight with you. If I tell you this is black, I'll show you the color black. If I tell you it's white, I will show you white. I don't just want you to imagine it. This is what I do with my people. I show them evidence. When I told them that people were committing suicide, some of them thought I was joking. I had to bring a girl on the day of the event who was on the verge of taking her own life. And she came and she spoke. When I told them the practice was still going on, at the event, we brought a guy who said that even in Abia State, that is not such an epicenter of this practice. Imo State is the epicenter, and then Anambra. But even in Abia State, a guy, someone who is so-called part of the freeborn, Wadiala or Diala, what they call them, or Amadi, someone who belongs to that, went and shook hands with the person who belongs to the Osu caste, and they find the other person, and you have to be mildly ostracized for a while. Okay, if you have deeper relationship with them, they will ostracize you completely, and you become Osu by association. This, I'm not talking 1950 something or 1970. No, this was just 2017, 18. That was when this thing was happening. Up until this day, it is still happening. So my message to my people is, here is this cankerworm that we have in our midst, this cancer that is eating deep into the fabrics of our cultural bonding that we need to deal with right now, or else we are going to be dismembered from the inside. Implosiveness is the worst thing that can happen to any culture or society. If we implode, nobody can help us. If the explosion is coming from outside, we might band together to defend it. But if we allow ourselves to be disconnected in this manner and to be completely imploded, we cannot be able to get help from anywhere. That's why I tell them, here is the evidence, here is the proof, here it is, we need to do something about it. And then secondly, I'm going back to the movie that I made again. I decided to make that movie because I felt that there are so many things you will not be able to say just going on radio, except that you put them inside a movie when people will sit down and digest in the comfort of their homes and understand the impact, the psychological impact, and understand that this thing actually should not be practiced. Let me read you something very briefly. Now, in 1956, on March 20, 1956, Igbo legislators in the Eastern Region House of Assembly in Enugu abrogated the practice, declaring it unlawful and a crime punishable by law. Now, in his address to the defunct Eastern Region House of Assembly on March 20, 1956, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe described the Osuka system as devilish and uncharitable, saying it was wrong to brand any human being with a label of inferiority due to accident of history. Okay, my question is, what does he mean by accident of history? When Nnamdi Azikiwe said due to an accident of history, what does he mean? That's the big elephant in the room, and that's what this movie called Osu is going to address. We went into those days of Osu practice and excavated everything that was hidden, exposed the true origins of Osu to the point that even a newborn baby will understand where it came from. And that movie then answers the question of why did Nnamdi Azikiwe say that Osu, labeling people as Osukas is due to an accident of history is very bad. So that accident of history was explained in this movie because what we believe as Osu is not what Osu really is. The people we call Osu today are actually not Osu. They are our own kind. It is a devilish propaganda that has labeled them as such. And that's what this movie is going to explain in black and white.
In black and white. Okay, now, prior to this interview, we had a very hot discussion on this issue because people are being affected, and this is a practice that is expected to be abolished, which is not, in quote. But really, the issue of sensitization and education came up. Let's bring this to a bigger table, a national discourse. How do we draw lessons from the negative aspect of this practice or belief so that we can have a better nation, a better society, so that we can also grow love amongst ourselves, tolerance in quotes?
Okay, so I've lived in America for a bunch of years, I lived in America a lot, and when you come to America or Europe or anywhere, Africans no longer understand, they no longer see those tribal lines again, which something suddenly bonds us together because we all face racism at the same time. When racism comes, it doesn't say, are you Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, are you Efik, are you from Ghana? They lump all of us into
as one.
And we go through it at once. Now, bring it down home today and see how it feels that people who share the same destiny with you, people who share the same culture and tradition with you, you grew up knowing them as a baby. This is coming down home. It is so repugnant. It is so distasteful. It is so horrible. I mean, when I think about it, I don't know how to wrap my head around that. People today, let me tell you the truth. If you look at, I went to meet one man during the abolition program. The guy told me, he said, Joe, I want to take you to my house. I came to his house. He brought his album and showed me the picture he took with his wife and his 5 daughters. His wife and he's a medical doctor. And the guy said to me, Joe, look at all my beautiful daughters. I said, yeah, wonderful. They look so beautiful. And he said to me, do you know that none of them married an Igbo man? I said, what? He said, none of them. And all of them had their first date. Their second dates were Igbos. But none of them ended up with an Igbo person. Because the moment they date an Igbo person, they will get to the point where
The
they
question
say, let's
pops
go
up.
and they find out, boom, they cut it off. So 5 daughters, all married to either Edo or Yoruba or someone. Now, you are chasing your own out. Do you think that when they marry those people, that they will ever want to have anything to do with Igbo land again? So if we are also clamoring to have a place at the center or in the leadership of Nigeria, if this one is not resolved, it's going to be extremely difficult, because you are going to have some of those people that we have ostracized from our midst, people we are discriminating against. Most of them are already in power today, because for some strange, mysterious reason, these people we call also are actually some of the richest people we have in Igbo land today, incidentally. So I'm saying to my people, if you want to have a place in the sun, you've got to learn how to put up with blisters. And in this case, we're not even putting up with blisters. We are only trying to be sensible enough to bring our own together. I see what the Yorubas do. There are people who bear Yoruba names in Kogi State today. And the Yoruba people are always looking for where they find anybody that even behaves like he's Yoruba. Even if you don't have the Yoruba name, they will grab you and bring you together, because there is so much power and strength in unity and numbers. Why are we scattering our own? What we should be doing now is to bring more numbers together. We are too many as a people. In South today, there are so many people who are Igbos who say, oh, we are not Igbos. It is because this division has not been dealt with. There are Ikwere people, there are Igbo-speaking people in Delta. How can we bring them together if on our own we are still discriminating against the people we call Osu? So for us to be able to foster unity, both internally and on a national level, we need to eliminate all manner of segregation, all manner of discrimination on every level, by every stretch. Every single appearance of it has to be eliminated, whether it is internally or externally. It does not bode well for anybody. That's why I am on this journey, to make sure that we see the end of this in my lifetime.
Mr. Joseph Okechukwu, I want to thank you so much for your time on Insight this week, and hopefully we will have a part 2 of this conversation, because it is a national conversation, not just for a particular segment. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll have you talk more on this another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last week, we promised to bring you the concluding part of our conversation on cancer treatment and response mechanisms. Here is the conclusion.
Managing cancer patient is capital intensive. Yes. No amount of money, a single cancer patient, through the course of his treatment can engulf up to 30, 40, 50 million. So it's actually not a joke. This 50 million, if you put it for malaria, upper respiratory tract infection, and some minor ailments, it can actually go a very long way. It can support or treat millions of people. So you see, and what the National Health Insurance Agency is getting is actually very minimal. So pushing it completely, a blame on the National Health Insurance Scheme, I still think it's...
So there has to be somewhat, not somewhat, in fact, there has to be an expanded plan in place.
There has to be, yes.
Multi-sector.
Yes, and I believe they are currently working on that, on how to expand. We had a series of meetings, when it comes to this issue of Cancer Health Fund. When it was first transferred to NICRAD, we formed a committee, the NICRAD and the National Health Insurance Scheme, to devise model on how best we can improve funding of this special group of patients that we can have, and how to disburse the fund. I think we were able to come up with 3 good models, of which we selected one. But sometimes implementation of virtually whatever you draft up, the policies, takes time because of the lack of funds. So we are trying to see an increased funding into this cancer health one, and then we can continue from the discussion where we stop and see how we can improve the funding of this special group of patients.
Prof, of course, already you've alluded to the progress or status of the National Strategic Cancer Control Plan, you know, but I'd like to know, does the current plan, the subsisting plan, does it spring from the previous plan, a similar plan that was launched, I think that was in 2015, with some certain amounts pegged, you know, to it. I think it was a total of $250 million to be actively used for interventions during, I think it was between 2018 and 2022. Your own plan, the subsisting plan, you know, did take off in 2023, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and it's supposed to last to 2027. That's the national. How do they correlate? And, you know, how do they correlate essentially, and where are we right now?
Okay, so you've actually rightly captured it. What we had before was 2018 to 2022, the National Cancer Plan. We actually drafted that plan to give a guide to how the country faces cancer menace generally. So a cut across the areas of cancer prevention, cancer research, treatment, and in general control. We have made some certain positive moves there. I cannot recall exactly the percentage of the coverage of the success that we have recorded in the previous plan. But the new plan is just like a continuation of the previous plan. We normally change it, you know, every 5 years to assess where we have actually improved, make a positive mark, and then where we need to go back and then change the strategy, just like other countries are doing in the world. So the current National Cancer Plan that we have included so many new things that were not hitherto present in the previous plan, like the issue of survivorship, you know, the care for those that are cured or those that have been treated and they are now going about doing their normal lives. They too, they need care, which was heavily neglected, and some part of also palliative care. They are all part of the current National Cancer Control Plan, but most of the activities that we are doing starting from the year 2024, we are following the National Cancer Control Plan. The current one is like our roadmap. It's the one that is giving us a guide to what we do and what we are currently doing and what we will continue to do till the year 2025.
Prof, finally, in rounding off our conversation, but let me just quickly say this before I land with a question. You know, I would like to reiterate here and now that, you know, one of the things that patients, and we've talked about this, you yourself, in fact, you even started this whole capital-intensive nature of treatment. So I would just like to reiterate that one of the things patients and, you know, cancer-impacted families often realize, and they do realize it quickly, is that the cost of treatment, whether in government-owned hospital, is very similar to that of private facilities here in Nigeria. So it is expensive here, it is expensive there, generally. You know, but in terms of the plan, you know, having a roadmap already, some of the things that are not previously captured, now being captured, you know, what other innovative solutions are we looking at designing nationally? You know, perhaps as a policy, perhaps as a practice, you know, to engender, some time ago, you talked about 6 new machines being acquired, 6 tertiary institutions being expanded to, just so we can also increase access. I guess these are some of the plans.
Access, yeah.
So how do we engender a robust ecosystem? You know, that system, you know, that pushes for progress in cancer treatment and management here in Nigeria. Finally, Prof.
Okay. So just like we have mentioned, those were just part of activities that the Institute is currently doing to improve access to cancer care services in the country. Access we also improve access through this cancer health fund that we are currently pushing, because we are still treating. There is also a program we call Cancer Access Program, the National Cancer Access Program. Now, through that program, what we did is that the federal government entered into a collaboration between us and the pharmaceutical companies that we have there, about 8 or 9, to supply us with good quality cancer medications to our patient at a subsidized rate. Subsidized rate here, I mean at 50% of shelf cost. And it's currently ongoing, and we are getting these services. They have agreed to supply us, and we are currently using that to assist our cancer patients. This is all with the hope to improving access to quality care in all the tertiary hospitals that we have in the country. I've earlier mentioned about the screening services that before the coming of this government was not in existence in our tertiary institution or in anywhere. Sometimes if there is no hospital that you can just walk in and say you want to get screened, and you can be pointed to a department or a unit where you can go for that screening. Now, as I'm talking to you now, our machines are on ground for screening a lot of cancers that we have commonly, these 5 most common cancers. This is happening for the first time in the country. We are also into a lot of collaborations with international organizations, international hospitals and communities on how to support cancer treatment generally. You know, we have St. Jude Hospital, who we are currently working and collaborating with to assist with, the children that have cancers in the country, to assist them immensely in the provision of a kind of special cancer access program for children. We are working with International Agency for Research Control, that is IRAC, and African Cancer Research Network, to standardize the nature of cancer data that we have in the country. We are working with Mayo Clinic, Milken Institute, conducting, we also have Syndicate Bio, where we are currently conducting a synergistic research in the field of cancer. With the Syndicate Bio, is actually the project that we are conducting is what we call it a national genomic study. It is the first of its kind in the country, and the essence of that research that we are currently conducting nationwide is to know the signature of virtually all the common cancers that we have, and then have a database where the modifiers, the movers and shakers of cancers, of these 5 common cancers, are the genetic mutation, just like I've mentioned, the signatures, can be known. And once known, that will give a room for the design of novel therapies that are purely based on our race. Because, you know, I've always mentioned that sometimes most of this, the new innovative drugs that we are getting are purely based on the research conducted on Caucasians. Some, and then they just transfer those drugs to us, and then with the expectation that some will work. Yes, definitely some will work, but some will produce more side effect to us than cure, because the study or the research or the clinical trial was conducted purely on the white. So if by the time we finish these studies, we have our own signature, so we know the genetic map of the modifiers of these cancers that we have, the signature of virtually each and every cancer in black race. It is not going to only benefit Nigeria, but African population in general.
Indeed. It's quite significant, I must say, in terms of research, in terms of treatment. Director General, National Institute for Cancer Research and Treatment, Professor Osman Aliyu, thank you so much for coming on Insight. It's been great listening to your insights on this issue. We'd like to see you do some more work so that we can give some ray of hope to cancer patients and impacted families in Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on our program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Any issue of public concern,
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of grievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
and gaining understanding is also getting insight.
And that's Insight today. Thank you so much for your time. Don't forget, we are one. Let's remain tolerant, loving and kind to each other. Life is a gift from God. It is beautiful. Be your brother's keeper. Shun acts capable of dividing us. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.